Anyway, hello. So could you first tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization you are currently wrangling?
Yes, I'm going first.
You go.
Like you're looking at me. Okay. I'm Allery Clark. I'm the executive director of the full title is DC Arts and Humanities Education Collaborative. Every time I say it, it's like, whoo, I lose people. DC Collaborative is a short name. We work in the arts education space, but we're a service organization. So we serve directly the artists and arts organizations that are doing youth programming in the area.
All right. My name is Scott Dodson. I'm the executive director of the Library of Virginia Foundation. We are part of the private-public partnership with the Library of Virginia, which is the state archives and library for the Commonwealth. I say Commonwealth now because I'm state adjacent. We are kind of like if you combine the National Archives and Library of Congress into one institution. So we have 140 million items in the collection going all the way back to Jamestown. A huge genealogical resource. Then we also do public programming, primarily around history, genealogy, and literary arts. We have an education program. The foundation is primarily responsible for, as you can imagine, philanthropy, advocacy. We do some programming and events, but for the most part, our job is to make sure that the library can do the best work that it is able to do.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Jang. I'm the managing director of Pig Iron Theater Company. We are a producer of new works that are unusual, devised, ensemble-based. We are also a trainer of the next generation of risk-taking artists. This is good timing for it because I can say that we used to have a graduate program in devised performance with the University of the Arts, which of course shuttered unceremoniously in June, not that long ago, but the word is out now. We are now in the spring going to begin with a new partner, Rowan University in New Jersey, still to offer that the MFA and the certificate.
Yay.
Yeah, I think at this thing 2 weeks earlier, I would say, I don't know, maybe the crisis hasn't been managed.
First, I'm gonna say that I'm very happy to be here because I didn't get to enjoy this building.
Same. Yeah.
Scott and I were in the whole thing over there. So, my name is Marietta Ulacia. I am in New York. My organization is called the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, but it's now being renamed Bilongo, and you need to like Bilongo. The reason for that was because it was too long, nobody could say it, nobody could remember it, and the acronym was Alja, and it sounded like Arabic, Al Jazeera, like, no. So Bilongo is supposed to give a sense of belonging, and it sounds Latin, it sounds African, and it is. We are in the middle of also building a new theater, a new cultural center, which is gonna be called Casa Bilongo in East Harlem, which is needed because East Harlem doesn't have a lot of cultural offerings, and we need to have there a cafe, a theater, a cultural center. The organization is mainly a presenter and a producer of jazz or of Latin jazz, but also music in general. And we produce and present our own orchestra and many guest artists from all around the world and all of the United States. We also have an education program that encompasses a youth orchestra and senior centers and 25 schools in the 5 boroughs of New York. And we also have a collection, and that program, we call it a preservation program because we collect music that have been written for big bands, because big bands are disappearing because they are too costly to maintain. So every year we put out an RFP for composers to write music for big band, and we pay it, and then we perform it, and then we collect that music and also collect the music of composers that are no longer with us, that have passed, and the library is very big.
Wow, yes, and Marietta gets special points because she just got back from London yesterday to New York.
No, tonight.
Tonight.
To this morning.
Today?
3 o'clock.
She got home today to New York, and then she came here to be with us, so. formed several coherent sentences that I would not be able to form. So good job, well done you. I would be out of it, but thank you for all of us for being here
What
today.
happened when you are at night every night?
That's great. So we had lots of things to talk about. I don't know if you've all experienced any change in the last 3-4 years, or if it's all been pretty steady. But I'm curious, in your own leadership in the sort of daily practice, are you noticing nowadays in the last few months or so or years the sort of particular challenges that keep coming up in leading an organization, sort of things that you keep bumping into? It's like, oh, I guess I better do that again. And curious if anybody who wants to start. Anything?
Oh, okay.
Look at that. So I can just look one way or the other.
I know. Just ping pong.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, for us, funding, I feel like it's the same. I don't know that the answer has changed as much as just like the landscape or the concern has changed. I've been a DC collaborative for almost 2 years in January. Our budget has dropped pretty significantly since before the pandemic to now. I didn't get to experience that higher budget, but I'm assuming that the stress of finding the money was the same. I feel like in talking to funders, what I constantly hear about is a lot of funders are getting like triple the applications that they got prior to the pandemic, and their giving amount has not necessarily increased. We're finally starting to see the uptick of that a little bit, but particularly at the height of the pandemic with the stock market dropping, they were giving even less. And I feel like they're constantly toggling between more grants that are smaller, like having a wider impact, as opposed to like lesser grants that are larger. But then as a nonprofit, it's like, well, what do I do with $10,000, right? For me particularly, I feel like it's even harder for service organizations, particularly since the height of the pandemic. There's all this focus, right, in arts education specifically, serving the youth directly. And so there's a lack of understanding, I would say, from the philanthropic world of understanding the whole ecosystem. And literally, students will not get some of the opportunities in DC, particularly without us, right? We connected 43 programs last year to 86 different schools in DC. That's about 9,000 students that really wouldn't get programming if we didn't exist. But there continues to be, I would say, that preference for direct programming. There's also been a shift in funding priorities. I was actually talking about this morning. There's a lot for like about truancy and absenteeism, for health specific things, for economic development things, all of which I feel like the arts could contribute to. But you pull up the RFA and that word is like, I mean, what? Like it doesn't even ring true. Yeah, I mean, I feel like statistically, I continue to feel stressed as a Black leader, and all the statistics about how still in the height of the pandemic, you know, it's still a challenge for Black-led and BIPOC-led organizations to get some of that institutional funding. Thankfully, the collaborative continues to see like a consistency in our long-term funders, which is only a handful, right? But having to constantly find new and replace some of what we lost. Yeah, continues to be a challenge. I feel like I talk to a lot of my counterparts and they're having a furlough cut. You know, I always joke, I feel like Rose on the Titanic door. Like we're just trying to like not fall in the water like Jack.
Yeah, to go off that, I would say that we're seeing some of that issue as well. I think when I talk to colleagues, at least in my area, what we're seeing is that, and you're seeing this naturally, especially with small donations, are really disappearing. They always kind of disappear a little bit in an election year, so it's hard to tell what is post-pandemic, what's change in tax law, what's election. But you know, we're seeing, you know, for this purpose, I'll say gifts under $1,000. People are seeing those drop by 20-30%. And while it may not make a huge impact on everybody's bottom line right now, that's where your larger donors are coming from 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? It's like the old saying, every $500,000 gift that you get started out as a $500 donor. I'm speaking as somebody that said this from a university, so take the numbers with a grain of salt. But I think it's true. I think all of your major fundraising comes at some point from that lower donor base because there is a pipeline there. For me, I would say it's also really finding people. I know that the people in this room may or may not like see that as much. especially if you're still in the program. But it's really hard, and maybe it's that I'm in Richmond, Virginia. It's a city that's growing, but it's not New York. It's not Philadelphia. It's not DC. It's not LA. We have a really great arts and cultural scene. I would say one of the best museums in the East Coast. But it's really hard to find people that want to do these jobs and want to do them well and aren't asking for compensation that falls outside of the regional norms, which is, it's a really interesting conversation when I talk to my board about once you start getting into six-figure positions, which we have, it starts to become a very different conversation because the mindset is still that of, well, this is tiny little Richmond, Virginia. And that, the economy doesn't work that way. The housing market doesn't work that way. Food prices don't work that way. And I think that we're having a really hard time being able to fill those gaps with qualified people. We were talking earlier tonight too, and even like we have several PTEs that are on because we kind of oversee our retail and our cafe operations for the institution. And finding part-time employees that are willing to stay for more than 2 weeks at a time is a real issue. But you need these people because those are revenue generating pieces of business that have nothing to do with art, that have nothing to do with culture, but you have to have them to be successful. So that's really what I'm seeing. When we put out jobs, we get a lot of applications, but I don't know how many applications of quality we're seeing that you would have seen maybe 7 or 8 years ago pre-pandemic. And it's a real shift that I think everybody's kind of working through right now.
To interpret this question slightly different in terms of like a day-to-day struggle, something that's really pulling my focus. I'd say the biggest challenge as a leader is that there's always more work to be done, right? That you can do that you could do it all, and there would still never be a perfect solution because you're up against so many different things, right? There's the day-to-day of the work that you do for your organization, but there's also how you fit into the ecosystem, getting to know the civic leaders, getting to know arts and cultural alliances, getting to know who else fits into the world that you live in. You can always do more donor cultivation. You can always think about how to better engage your board. None of these things are teleological, right? There's not an end to any of this work. So it's hard, and it can feel overwhelming sometimes to feel like, yes, I've got this day to day of like, God, I've got to help someone build this set, or I've got to make sure that this designer gets paid, but also we're up against very large scale systemic issues that impact all of us. So do I take this time to have a one-on-one with one of my employees? Do I take this time to meet with a potential new donor? Do I take this time to research a new grant? Do I take this time to try to get a meeting with a city council member about funding that I might not see until 5 years from now? And that's, I think, really the job of leadership is trying to filter all of that out. Because it's very easy to feel like everything is urgent all the time. It's very easy to feel like there is always a lion in the room with you. And I think the wisdom that you gain eventually through this program, through work experience, through just talking and meeting other people to do this, is to recognize when the lion is actually in the room. And I guess as someone who's like lived through a couple different actual crises now, that feels a lot more real. I was at Roundhouse Theater in Bethesda as their PR manager when the pandemic shutdown happened. And actually, I wrote the release saying that we were shutting down the theater on my birthday in 2020. But I've got to say, because I was ready, because I had a great team behind me, I went into this like weird hyper-focused fugue state, and writing the release was somehow the easiest thing in the world because I was ready for a real crisis. I had the news about UArts shutting down with 7 days notice broken to me by a colleague. Someone texted me on a Friday afternoon, "Hey, I'm so sorry about the news," sent me an article to the Inquirer, which I don't subscribe to. So I did have to pay $1 to find out about that. And it took that moment of actually, I know what a crisis feels like. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to be really sad and upset for one weekend. And then we're going to hit the ground running on Monday and look for a new partner and figure out who we need to take care of. So I think that's the thing, is that there's always more work to be done, but how do you focus yourself to best take care of the people you're responsible for?
Wow. All of that. But I think I'm in a lucky place right now because doing a capital campaign puts you in the center of the money. And it attracts a lot of people who want to be with you. So fundraising wise, I am lucky right now. We are attracting a lot of private philanthropy dollars, a lot of public money. We got like 11 million like that without even asking. So the challenge is to connect, for me, to connect with the community and make it valid. I found out, I was telling Scott, that I found out that that is my biggest challenge in art. One is that connecting with the community, because the community gives you credibility for the donors to give you that money. First, the public dollars come in, and then the private philanthropy funds. And not taking no for an answer ever. I had a donor who I went to a meeting and I asked him for $2 million. And he said, like, I'm not liquid right now because, I said, you don't need to be liquid. You just need to sign the pledge. And when you're liquid, and he was like, oh my God, but you, so like, you just sign, don't worry about it. And he did that. So it's a matter of being very adaptable, whatever your situation is, I understand it and I'll go with it. And I mean, fundraising wise, New York is in a good place in public money. Finding the individual donors is always a challenge when your board is not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. So we do a lot of events. I go out every night just to cultivate that individual donor that is going to give you only 1,000, and then you convince him that it's going to be 20 because I saw in the paper that you gave them 20, so you give me 21, and doing all of that, giving a lot of free things. I'm lucky also that I have a resident orchestra. So every time I need to convince anybody, I invite them to free concerts, free rehearsals, free everything. And fundraising wise, but technology for me is an issue. And a combination of technology and finding the people. I don't find people. So in fact, I steal people from other states. My 2 fundraisers are from here, from DC. And I promised them the moon and the sky to move to New York and work with me. And they did. And they're still there. So paying them, the kind of money that you need to live in New York. But finding qualified people is very, very hard because a lot of the field is still being full of arts, and artists think that they can manage what they can do. And then a lot of the managers are coming from corporate, they don't understand the arts. Then you have a lot of young people who really have no understanding that the arts have no hours. You work 24/7. And within that, you get your vacation, you get everything you need to do. But this is 24/7. And a lot of people who come from corporate don't understand that. So finding people is very hard. And then when you find them, technology is ahead of us, 10 years ahead of us. Mm-hmm. Then my job is constantly training people, and answering questions. People ask me, what do you do? I say, I answer questions. That's all I do. So because people the employees just ask, how do I do this? How do I do that? And training with technology, this day, technology is our friend, but it's also, it moves so fast that to take advantage of everything that it has to offer, you need to be adaptable, be very open, and embrace it. Because if you don't embrace it, the money's not coming. I invest a lot of time in not only buying technology, but training myself, training the new generations to use it. But I don't want people writing grants with AI because you could tell. And so, but I think that's the biggest challenge is finding good employees and people open enough to embrace technology to move forward. Especially in a city like New York, that is very fast.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm curious to follow up, maybe Jasmine, you can start. So how do you know what to do when you show up in the morning. So how do you decide, of all the things that are going to come at you, how do you start to anchor? Well, I really have to focus on that, even if this comes at me, I need to focus on that. How do you start to sort of sort your attention by day or week or month, or do you?
Sometimes you just don't.
You don't.
No, I mean, I think a big thing I've had to learn about leadership is that leadership is also facilitation. Leadership is also, advocacy. It's also empowering the people that you lead to do their best work. Work culture is this term that gets thrown around, but it's so important. I think getting to a place where you understand and respect everyone that you're working with, and they're all aligned around what they're doing and why this matters, and who knows what and who can get you there. Oftentimes when I'm very confused or I'm very overwhelmed, I can lean on them, and they can lean on me, vice versa, right? It's a collaborative, it's a symbiotic kind of thing. So I mean, the nuts and bolts of it are, you just know which things are time sensitive and which aren't. You just know, like, this grant is due tomorrow, and and it's potentially worth $50,000. That's a bigger deal probably than some lunch I have to put off by a few days. But a lot of it is also just recentering yourself with the people you work with, and just checking in with them constantly. For me, at least, it's having a lot of information. I think I am in the business of being in everyone else's business. My Google Calendar at all times is a horrifying thing to look at because I just have every single staff member's calendar also open. Because I just need to know, right? Yeah, we just need to know what everyone else is doing, and who is on what, and who is informed about what, and who is responsible for what. But I think, as crazy as that might sound, that actually brings me a certain amount of peace. Like, the better that people are about communicating what they know and what they don't know, and what their goals are and where they are, the easier it is for me to say, okay, I've taken all of that in somehow in the black box of my mind. I've absorbed all of your things, and I can say now, I think we should do this first. I don't know. That's such a non-answer, but
It's very sane.
yeah.
So
Is to know as much as you can, and then also to acknowledge when you don't. I have a really lovely support group of other theater managing directors in Philly, and we just have a group text where sometimes I am truly stumped. And I just text them, like, has anyone ever dealt with a contract like this? What do I do? And usually they can help, or they can say, like, oh, weird, we also don't know. And then we can figure it out together. So yes, know as much as you can, and then just admit that you don't know something.
Scott, I'm curious about how do you know what to do each day when you show up?
So I get about 45 minutes in the morning and about 30 minutes at the end of the day where I get to decide what I want to work on, generally. A lot of the rest of my day is answering questions, responding to emails, getting phone calls, working with board members. And some of my days are more planned out than others. It's kind of interesting. I have to travel a lot for my work, so I'm like all over the state, sometimes in DC, sometimes in Norfolk, sometimes in Southwest. There's a lot of that goes on as well. I've been getting better, I guess, about really managing my schedule in a way where I can block out time to do things. Once a week, I finally started cheating, and I have this desk pad that, it's one of those things you buy on Amazon where you kind of go by day and you write all the things you want to accomplish in each day. And so I've kind of gotten to the point where if I can get these 2 things done, if I can call these donors, or if I can set up these 2 meetings in any given day, I call that a success, because I don't really know what the rest of the day is going to look like. We're part of a public-private partnership. One of the hardest things we have to do is search for information to be able to do our job with people that are amazing at their work. A lot of them are archivists, a lot of them are librarians, but they're working on a 100-year-long timeline, and we have a grant deadline in 2 weeks. It's a lot of that happens in these conversations too. So it's I think at the end of the day, and once you get up to any leadership position, if you can accomplish those 2 or 3 things in any given day, you got to chalk it up as a win. I have a board member that always says, once you move into a leadership position, they're really paying you for 5% of your time, because the other 95% of your time is really listening to other people do their jobs or trying to work with other people. And it's, I don't know if it's quite that drastic, But there certainly is a lot of, everything's a fire to somebody, everything's a problem for somebody, everything's a success for somebody. And I think trying to navigate all of that, we have in the building itself, there's about 175 of us. My team isn't that big, obviously, but so I think that trying to like map out how you even have those conversations sometimes can take your entire day. I just, I have to kind of look at everything in quarters sometimes.
But you, Valerie, any tips or tricks? How do you organize your attention?
I actually don't think I find it that hard. Maybe I'm fortunate in listening to them. I'm a calendar addict, so I definitely go by my calendar and kind of go off of like what's due, when. My team knows I don't do last minute. Period. So I don't submit. My goal is always submit grants even at least the day before, and if we're doing it the day before, we're late. So usually just planning backwards from that. I've always been really good at setting boundaries for myself. So making sure that I don't overpack my day with meetings or like have at least one day out the week where there's not as many meetings for me to do other things. Even with my board, like they can't really just, well, we're being recorded, but they can't, they're usually pretty good at like, they call, I call them back when I can. Like I don't feel that sense of urgency where like if they're calling or emailing, I have to like hurry up. So yeah, I feel like setting boundaries, being clear about those, whether they're communicated or just internal. I tell my staff, we also share each other's calendars, but like don't schedule a meeting if somebody has one at 11 and then has one at 1, like allow them to make sure that they eat and things like that. So I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a service organization. We don't really have huge emergencies, knock on wood, where things just, feel pretty, all of it feels like a priority, like you said, but managing it out, it feels pretty easy to me.
I feel like I should add a disclaimer, by the way, that all of our boards are amazing. And we love them.
We're so grateful to all of
They
our.
are the most amazing people that we have. And I want them to know that.
I don't think we're very good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Want to make sure that gets into the.
Really noted.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Marianne, it sounds like you just don't stop, but how do you pay attention? How do you figure out how to spend?
No,
your
I do
day?
have a system.
Okay.
I do have a
Your system.
system. One is technology. We started using Monday.com. Everybody put their projects there, and then everybody knows what's going on. Then now we're changing to a new platform. But from 9 to 11 in the morning, the only thing I do is have 15-minute meetings with all the directors. And I call that divide and conquer. I give them a lot of power. They make a lot of decisions. And that 15 minutes in the morning is their time to check with me if they're okay. If this what they're doing is okay, what do I think about that? So I start at 9, then 9 to 9:15, 15, like that. All my directors meet with me in the morning. By 11, we know what needs to be done that day. What of all the things that I hear from all of them, who has the priority? And then I say, okay, the priority today is performance. So forget about marketing, forget about finance, performance, because we have a show tomorrow and everybody rally behind that. At the beginning, I thought that I was excessive to have a meeting every day, but it really creates a rhythm in which I never have a crisis because, it builds slowly, little by little. The person who I meet only once a week, who is my artistic director, and yes, we could meet more often, is the one that creates more problem because we don't meet frequently enough.
Mhm.
And sometimes things happen and he doesn't know, I don't know, misunderstanding, what do we need to do? And I think allocating that time is essential. And then I work the rest of the day on whatever the priority is. But that system works. In fact, I had a director who really resented because he thought that he was being checked. It's not a check, it's just, I'm listening to you. He resented that and he had a lot of problems. A lot of problems. He almost lost his job because he was doing things without any advice, without any knowledge of how things integrate in the bigger organization. In his department, it was education. So now he's part of the team.
Thanks, came around. And just so we're not always talking about challenges and crisis, I'm curious if you notice opportunities for different ways of working that are coming up because the world is shifting so much. Are there sort of chances to be different or do different that you see opening up in all of the challenges?
You made the first. You made the first. You made the first.
I had a look in your eye.
I gotta be quiet. Well, I feel like one thing that I've been focused on as a collaborative is trying to constantly meet people outside of the arts world. I feel like particularly since I've been working in the DC arts sector specifically for like 15 years, I know a lot of people in the arts world, in the arts education space, but I always feel like where the opportunity is in other sectors, either for money or partnerships. Even in DC government, like we have a strong relationship with DC Commission, but there's so many agencies and so many opportunities. So trying to build relationships with other agencies, corporations. We just did board recruitment and are specifically adding like people who have nothing to do with the arts. When I joined the organization, the board was very like arts heavy, and not necessarily wanting to lose that, right? Still having those spots, but we're adding somebody from a creative agency, which is really exciting to me, and like what that will look like and what partnerships or perspective that they can bring. I feel like I'm always trying to place myself in spaces, go to events, just constantly meet people outside of my immediate space, because I feel like that's where the innovation comes from, or the partnerships or possibilities. Some of it is me scheming. I'm going to like some transportation event next week that has nothing to do with the arts. They're probably gonna be talking about bike lanes, and I'm going to be in there like, but do you know students in DC don't have school buses to go on field trips? It's all aligned, right? Transportation is transportation, even if they don't know it yet.
If I could jump on that, I agree. I find myself, again, because we're statewide, going to a lot of Chamber of Commerce meetings around the state, because that's the easiest way to meet. It's the easiest way to meet the community leaders, but it's also the easiest way to get like a real sense. Because every community, Virginia is not really a state. It's like 500 little tiny communities that kind of work together sometimes. And it's interesting from that standpoint, because you can learn a lot by going to those meetings and trying to get outside of your comfort zone and forcing yourself to network. I am an INTP. I do not like it, but I do it because I think it's an important part of the job. I would say the other big thing that, especially on the arts and cultural side, that I see as an opportunity, because I'm not sure that we've been paying as much attention to it, is really looking at what our audiences are looking for out of our work. I've seen this evolution that kind of happened over the last 20 years, where the artistic director, you live and die by that artistic vision. This is what we're presenting to the world. To kind of opening it up about what arts organizations think our audiences want. And I still don't think that we've crossed that line yet to actually asking them what they want and then actually doing what they want, because it doesn't always fit with what our artistic vision or idea of what we're trying to do is. And I think we're leaving a lot of audience members out there because we have such well, we're in this world. We have a very idealistic view of what the arts are and what a specific genre can do, that I don't think we're always paying attention to what our audiences want. And I think because of that, we're starting to see that drift away a little bit. And I'm in a very different situation now than I would have been for the majority of my career, and very different focus. But I think for every, in the orchestra world, you always talk about like you have to put that piece of broccoli in with the candy or whatever. I don't know, you can pick your metaphor there. And I think that's great. But I also think we transitioned at some point to doing entire programs of broccoli. And we haven't quite gotten back from that yet. And that's where I really see a huge opportunity, is really doing that listening to say, oh, I know this is great, but do you want to experience this? And I think we ignore that a little too often still.
That's what I was talking about, connecting with the community, because they tell you exactly what they want. And you come with a proposal. In my case, we're opening a theater, but it's not about a theater. We call it more the community center, because it's like, what do they want to see there? It's not what I want to present, it's what people want to see there. And connecting with the community, not only give me an idea. We actually did surveys through the whole community. What do you want to see there? What do you want this place to be? Because if you have a place and nobody comes, you are going to fail. So connecting with the community is essential. You assist in a place to serve the people. So you need to connect with them, and they need to not only consume what you produce, but you need to produce something that is relevant to them. And it's a real partnership there. And that brings money to brings money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jasmine, are you seeing opportunities?
I have a very similar answer, I think, of just connecting better with communities, working cross sector. And I think recognizing that I think a lot of arts funding got into this dangerous place of sometimes an organization will have to chase the funding of, oh wow, they're doing funding for X thing, but actually we do Y. How do we add a new program to chase the funding for X? Instead of like starting much higher up and recognizing the things that the country, that states, that local communities, that these pockets of funding are aimed towards, are actually probably already built into your mission, and you're just not making the case for it properly, right? That a lot of cities want, vibrant city centers. They want workforce development. They want school programming or after school programming. They want people to be civically and community engaged, and the arts already do that. So I think there's a real opportunity for how do you connect better with the folks who are making these grants and making these opportunities and deciding these things, and just putting the arts into the conversation sooner, so that you're not chasing the grant language, and that it's built from the bottom up to include arts organizations, because they're a really important part of the culture and part of the community. And then I guess my second opportunity that I'm sort of recognizing is I think it's wonderful that programs like this exist. It's really necessary. It really makes a difference. It has this weird, secondary effect of sometimes then when you have a big capital I arts institution, the artists feel alienated from it. Because they didn't go to a program like this. They don't know what it means to be an art administrator, feel this like weird us versus them separation from the leadership, from the staff, from the institution that is actually there working for them, and that is often made up of artists like them. So I think there's a real opportunity to break that new barrier down again, and do some education and do some outreach with the artists that you're working with, and let them know, like, one, these are skills that we want you to have. We want you to be able to do this for yourself. If you want to found your own theater companies, great. Here are the tools to do that. And two, being in the institution does not mean that we are suddenly the man, right? Like, we are working against the man just as hard as you are. And we need you just as much as you need us. And it feels like there's a real opportunity there for just better education and awareness and collaboration between artists and institutions.
Helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Do you want to make a moment for questions if there are some? I always have plenty more, but does anybody in the audience have a question for any of our leaders about what you've heard? Hello.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I graduated in May last year from the program. I'm curious, and I want to go back to what some of you were saying at the beginning about how it's very hard to find the perfect employee or someone that works for your institution. So I'm curious because I have a lot of peers, given I just graduated, who feel like they're on an endless job search and that they're applying to jobs, they're qualified by the standards that the jobs are given. But what is it that leaders like yourselves are actually looking for in a candidate? And what do you have as expectations in contrast to somebody's salary expectations?
I'm always looking for people who are doers.
Yeah.
I receive resumes that are perfect, and then when I interview the person, it's like not real. I received very recently a very badly, it was not badly written, but it was an unqualified person according to the resume. However, when I interviewed this woman, she gave me such a can-do attitude that I said, I'm gonna take a chance. And I said, let me not be biased. And I brought HR into the meeting and said, what do you think about this woman? She really had no qualifications. I said, it looks good. She has management experience in retail, not in the arts, but she has management retail experience. I didn't know if that would translate into music, theater, producer. And it is the best employee I have right now. So what I would say is like, yes, you have your skills. Of course, you have to be qualified. That would be an advantage. But have this attitude of like, whatever it is, even if I have not done it, I'm willing to do it. Because in the arts, that's what it is. You never know what you're going to find. You never know how this production that you think is going to be perfect. The minute you put it on the stage, it will be a disaster. And you need a person who does not panic and say, okay, what needs to be done?
Yeah.
And that's what I always looking for. Flexibility and, being very personal because of course, I have fundraisers, but everybody in the arts is a fundraiser. We have to be in front of leaders all the time. And you have to be able to convince them that that money is for you. So, have to look the part.
Yeah. I mean, just to jump on that, I mean, I was having this conversation with a colleague last week that there's a lot of people that are like prepared to do the job, but they're not prepared to do the work. And I think that's a really hard thing to translate. I used to call it camper syndrome when I was younger. Like you have these people that are campers their entire life at whatever. And then they become a counselor and they're still playing and they're doing all the stuff. And you can't do that when you're a counselor, right? You have to be a counselor. You can't be a camper anymore. And I feel like we're like so invested in the art. I'm imagining most of us have some kind of arts background or we wouldn't be in the field. We all played music or danced or did theater or whatever else. And we have to love the stuff to be able to do the work. But there is something that has to shift from we're not playing anymore. We're doing the work. The other big thing for me, and my staff would probably be able to repeat this verbatim, I really value critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
And that may mean making big decisions, or that may mean maybe not emailing me this at 1:00 on a Saturday because it's not really that big a deal. And all those things kind of have to come together and like really being able to think through the situation, to be able to do some of the heavy lifting. Because otherwise what happens is you create this weird accountability model where people are asking you for permission to do everything. And that is never going to be feasible. And why would I want to hire somebody that's not going to be able to make some of those decisions on their own?
Yeah.
Can I just acknowledge, because I hear this and I want to say there's absolutely a hiring problem.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a pipeline issue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very skilled, very experienced people leaving the nonprofit field altogether because all of the skills you're learning are incredibly transferable, right? Like you are very skilled. You could do a lot of jobs for probably more money.
Yeah.
And I don't fault any people who recognize that and leave. So I think a lot of the entry-level positions, there is an issue of like, there's a lot of people wanting to enter the field. But a lot of the flight is happening at the director level. And how do we shift the pipeline to train those people so that they can be managers and they can be directors? So I want to just say I hear the frustration of how do folks who just graduated get into this field in the first place?
Yeah.
And a lot of that challenge is everything we've been talking about is that organizations have to be downsizing. Organizations are receiving less funding or even the same amount of funding while expenses are going up. And they're making really tough choices. So just know that I hear that. And I'll add a thing that I'm always looking for is just an anticipation of needs. It's just, can you recognize everything that's happening, not just in your direct role, but in the world around you, in all of the roles that you touch, and think ahead to how can I make someone else's job easier, or vice versa? How do I ask in advance for something that'll help me? So that's your advice, but also, yeah, it's really hard right now to work in the arts.
Yeah. Anything, Valerie?
I would say generally, I honestly think that there's a tension between the old school methodology and way of working and the new generation coming up. And that tension continues to live there. And the expectations between some like nonprofit leaders and what the new generation is bringing up. I actually have a great team. I'm very fortunate. But I feel like the newer generation of leaders and professionals have certain requirements that even when I was coming up, it wasn't being discussed, right? Things like pay and boundaries and vacation and all these things. And I commend it. Like conceptually, I think you all should continue to advocate for yourself and, speak with what you want. But it's like leaders of the older methodology, right? We're still kind of stuck in the way that we operate. And that's where the tension a lot of times lies. I think on both sides, we want the same thing, but how do we get there and what it looks like? There are very basic things. Even when I started at the collaborative that I changed because I was like, I want my younger people to stay and be happy, right? I still don't support job postings without salaries.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. And it's still happening, even with all of these conversations. And so that continues the tension to me of having a hard time finding a job. Right. I know when I was looking, I was like, I'm not applying to a job that doesn't post a salary, full stop.
Yeah.
But then that means I might be unemployed a little bit longer. Right. But again, it continues to be that tension. And even as an employer, I commend it. But when I started, my staff was like, I need a raise. And they deserved it. I would have never asked in my 20s the same way that they're asking me. Does it stress me the hell out? Oh, can I say hell? But does it stress me out doing my budget, right? And some of the stuff that I'm talking about? Absolutely. So, I just feel like that's where the tension continues. But I think that's what's changing the field because we do need to treat our administrators better. And like I said, even little things. I instituted unlimited vacation at the collaborative. I was like, it doesn't cost me anything, right? But to make people feel a certain way to stay, so I don't have some of these issues was really important to me.
Beautiful. Well, I'm noticing the time and you're going to have a chance to talk to all of each other at the reception. So I think I want to pivot to the reception. But first, let's thank our panelists for